Jace, I'm glad you're able to join us today on the summit. I'm really glad that you're here because I think you're probably one of the best people that I could think about that could come on to talk about this topic, which is how to be interesting and improvise. A lot of times we hear speakers say, "Oh, you just got to be ready for any audience. You got to be ready for anything. You just never know. You may walk in the room and the temperature is different than what you set up for. You got to throw everything out the window." But they don't
Yeah.
tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, but if I don't give this speech that I prepared, I'm screwed. So I wanted to bring you on because I think you're one of the best at doing this, and I wanted you to talk about how improv and improvisation can help a speaker not only retain the attention of his audience, but be a better communicator overall.
Sure. So let me share a story of my so we want to help people make a big impact, and if our people watching want to make a lot of money, that's what this is about, and that's what I want them to walk away with. What we're about to share, my first time speaking on a big stage helped me to do $96,000 in sales in like 90 minutes, and it was my first time on a big stage. So, is it okay if I just share the story of where I really got the power of this?
Of course, of course.
So, so I had a mentor, and I was working for this seminar company. I wanted my big break. Like I knew if I could get on one big stage and rock one big stage, then my career would be made. And I really believe that. I believe if someone gets on one stage and they crush sales, well, one, they got a whole bunch of money in their pocket, but two, they're probably going to pick up a lot more stages. And then three, they get a whole bunch of clients who are then going to upsell and upsell and upsell and refer. So I think people are just one stage away. So I had spoken in Orlando, Florida for the seminar company, and I used to live in Orlando, and I knew everybody there. There's a small crowd. I did real well, and frankly, we partied afterwards to celebrate. It was like a Friday night, and so Saturday I flew to Vegas where I was living, and I had lunch with my mentor. And my mentor, we're debriefing how I did the last night, and he looks at me and goes, you did pretty good. I'm supposed to speak tonight in front of 500 people on a real stage. I'm going to tell him I have to go to LA for work. Let's see how you do on a real stage. I'm like, oh crap. And I'll make this story short, but basically I show up to the event and I'm in the bath. I introduce myself to the host, and the host is not happy because my mentor was the headliner. And I introduced myself, and the host goes, there are 500 people here. They each paid $3,000. Your mentor is the headliner. There could be some resistance in the room. And so I'm like, I'm so freaked out, right? And I'm in the bathroom and I'm doing my deep breathing exercises. And I'm supposed to take these nice breaths. Ron, I'm not going to the bathroom. I'm just in the stall. And I'm so nervous. I'm going, and this dude comes in the stall, and the dude goes, "Did you hear the headliner's not here tonight?" And by the way, this story's true. And as far as I know, all my stories are true. So the guy goes, "Did you hear the headliner's not here?" And I go, "I heard that. What do you think about it?" And the guy goes, "I think it sucks." So I'm in the bathroom, and to this day, I've never seen this dude's face. To this day, I'm like freaking out. And then I go, "Well, I hear this guy Jase is here. What do you think about that?" And he goes, "Well, I'll let you know after I see him." So to his credit, he was open. So he leaves. So now I'm freaking out, right? It's my opportunity of a lifetime. It's a big stage. I know this could make or break my career. And someone literally came in the bathroom and said it sucked that I was there. And
Yes, dude.
so, huh?
I said, man, I can imagine deep breathing out of one end and then start all of a sudden deep breathing out of the other end.
Yeah, yeah. So that guy leaves, and I'm faced with this huge decision, and it's I could back out, right? And no one's gonna blame me. Like I got thrown in there last minute. I could have said I was sick. I certainly felt sick in that moment. But three things got me through that moment. One was I have faith in God, and so I knew no matter what happens, God's gonna love me, and at the end of the day, I'll be okay because God's gonna love me. Two was the power of improv and comedy. And I want to unpack that a little bit more in a moment. And then three, and this is where I believe we have to tell stories and be authentic about what's happened in our life. Part of our job is speak. Am I talking too much, or is this all right? I feel
No,
like I'm
this is about
okay.
you, man. This isn't my session. This is yours.
All right, cool. So I think as a speaker, I've heard some speakers say, oh, you don't need to tell the stories about how you walked uphill each way to school in the snow, all that. We do need to share with people, though, the toughest times we ever went through and how we triumphed in those tough times. And if we share that story of triumph, then our audience can go, okay, I'm in this tough time. Here's how the speaker won. Here's how I can apply it to my life, and here's how I can win. Here's how this maps over to selling from stage. When you're speaking to an audience, whatever's stopping them outside of that room in their life is what's stopping them inside that room from buying your stuff. So if you can teach them what you use to get through your challenges in life, they'll use it in the room to get through their personal challenges to free themselves up to buy their stuff. So for example, one of the things I talk about is, well, let me go back into the story and I'll unpack it there. So the third thing that let me leave that stall was, and I told this story for years before I realized what it was. The first time I ever bought a seminar, this guy got on stage and he sold the seminars $1,500, and I stood up to buy it. And my mom was with me, and she pulled my jacket. She sat me down. She said, "You're not going to buy this, are you?" But that guy was so good on stage, and I'd never spent more than like $200. I got up, and on trembling legs, I went to the back and I bought his stuff. And I was so nervous. Then when I went to his event, we ate fire. And so I got to experience fear and yet taking action to buy the course, fear and then eating fire. And this was back in 2002. So I bought a $4,500 course, and I was so scared to buy that, but I felt fear and I said yes. And I bought his course. And then at that course, we walked across a pit of broken glass. I was terrified of the fire. Wasn't so scared. The broken glass, I was terrified, but I got to feel the fear and say yes and move forward through the fear. And then the seminars get more expensive and more expensive. My mom calls me up. She says, haven't you been to enough seminars? And this is an example of a life lesson I learned that I shared with my mom. Along the way, I learned if you'll empty your pockets into your mind will always fill your pockets. So I said, no, Mom, I learned this. Now, when I'm doing my hour presentation, I tell that story because I want the audience to know, I don't care how much you've spent on seminars, it's okay and it's so safe for you to buy the next seminar, because if you empty your pockets in your mind will always fill your pockets. And that's been the truth. I'm in my 22nd year of speaking and coaching and going to seminars, and that has been the truth for me. So what allowed me to leave that stall was buying that guy's course, eating the fire, buying the $4,500 course, going on the glass walk, buying a $10,000 program, a series of courses. And I literally had to have a coach hold my hand and walk me to the table. I was so scared. And I got to say yes. And then we went ropes courses, and we climbed up and we jumped off. We did this deep. And so when my life and my future was on the line, one of the things that let me win was all these times I had faced my fear and moved through my fear. We get better at what we practice. I had practiced moving through fear. I got better moving through fear. So going back to the improv now. So I say yes, I leave it. I had the power to move through it. And now I get on stage, and sure enough, there was a lot of resistance in the room. Like, I'll never forget. I looked over here, and this guy was a metaphor for the entire room. He's sitting like this, just arms crossed. Like, I could see the side like this. He's like arms crossed, leaning back, like literally like a sourpuss like that. And I'm like, what do I do? How do I win here? And then I remembered improv. In improv, you have two jobs: be a deep listener and make your partner look great. There's another rule at improv. You've got a yes and, which means whatever reality is created by your partner in the scene, that's the reality. So you have to yes and it. And some training my mentor had given me was to find everything perfect. So I get on stage and I'm looking at this guy, and the whole audience is like, who are you? And I'm thinking, what can I do to turn this around? Then I thought, oh, just yes and it. And so I yes anded what happened in the bathroom. I told him I was doing my breathing exercises, and this guy came in and said it sucked that I was there. And the entire audience went, wow, they start laughing. And I'll never forget, this guy goes from this to like this to cheer to like this and cheering me on. And I did hypnosis show that night. And then the next morning I spoke and sold. And I'll never forget, Ron, because I shared what happened with authenticity, and I yes-anded the audience. The whole audience turns around. So the next morning I speak, and in I think it was 75 minutes, I did $96,000 in sales. And I'm talking to some attendees, and the host steps between me and the attendees. He goes, you need to talk to my assistant. And I said, I hope this opens a door for us to work together. And he's like, you're in. You don't know how far you're in. And so that opened the door for me to be on all of his Millionaire Maker boot camp stages for the next 6 months. And then I launched my own company out of that. And once I launched my own company, my income just way skyrocketed. One little tag on, by the way, on that. At the end of the event, I was kind of just taking it in. I was in the corner. I was like, I did it. I had this massive challenge come up. I had this massive fear came up. I moved through the fear and I did it. And the party left out of the story. I was in the bathroom when that guy said it sucked. I was there. When he first came in the bathroom, he goes, "Hey, Dave, is Dave here?" I'm like, "Dave's not here." Remember that old Cheech and Chong thing? Well, the next day, I did the 96,000. I'm standing in the corner, and we sold back then. It was like CDs and VCR tapes, and actually it was cassette tapes and VCR tapes. And we had a big yellow bag, and this guy's walking over with this yellow bag, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Dave." So I met the dude the other guy was looking for in the bathroom. To this day, I've never met the first guy. So that was a long story to land it of tell the stories and then be authentic, like dance with what happens.
So I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this thing called yes and. What is that?
So in improv, we yes and your partner. So, and I recommend no matter if you're going to speak, start to take improv wherever you are. So yes and means if you're doing a scene with someone and that person says to you, "How long, I can see that you're a robot." You might not have expected to be a robot. Yes, that's the reality that they've created for you. So yes and. So you literally think or say the words yes and then you build onto the reality that they've created. A way to think about it is people that you're dealing with have their own realities, whether or not those are grounded in a merited reality or not, it's their reality. And here's where improv, we're talking about speaking. Is it okay if I talk a little bit about sales?
Yeah, we can talk about whatever. I mean, this is your session.
Cool. So on a sales call or a discovery call, when you're closing someone, they may say, "Well, I can't do it because this." And from our point of view, as someone who's making money or an expert, we might say, of course you can. And I can, that's not reality at all. But if we invalidate them, and if we invalidate them, it's going to totally separate them. And it's not going to have them feel like they're they're actually going to get entrenched into that reality. So improv is actually a beautiful thing in sales calls because no matter what they say, when you get that's the reality they're creating, you can yes and it and join in them. And then from that place, you can move them to a new reality. So improv not just helps as a speaker, it helps massively when you're in a sales or a coaching conversation.
I think that it's interesting as a sales guy. I'm sitting here thinking like, it's like the ultimate objection buster, because if someone says, "Man, this is expensive," and you say, "Yes, and it's the reason that we've booked 10,000 meetings with meeting planners," they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, man, I don't think this will work." That may be true. It doesn't work for everybody, but yes, here are the people that it has worked for, right? And you just agree with them, but show relevant proof. To add to it, I think that could really work. I'm going to start doing that.
So yeah, so going back into that, so I was mentioning the triangle to you. So I'll screen share and show this triangle. When you're doing a presentation, there's like this slide comes from one of our events called Be Funny, Make Money. There's 3 parts to a presentation. There's the audience, there's you, the presenter, the presentation, and then the material, which is your script, your words, your dialogue. And so there's an interplay between the 3. And we like to say, just like a fuel needs, like a fire needs fuel, oxygen, and heat, humor, but I'd like to expand it beyond humor. I say humor because we were teaching this slide within the context of that event. A great presentation needs an interplay between the presenter, the material, and the audience. And so if you present something that's great, like a part of your material just lands and you see the audience love it, then you want to milk that for more and you want to acknowledge that. If you land something and the audience is like, "Ooh, I'm not so sure about that," then you want to have a way to address that. Your audience, this is kind of a deeper concept. Your audience starts out as a collection of souls. And when you're speaking, you want to speak one-to-one. I don't care how many people are in the room. When you're speaking, it's a one-to-one presentation. So let's suppose there's 100 people in the room. You're having 100 simultaneous conversations, but you don't speak to you speak to the individual. An interesting thing happens though. Your audience, if you ever seen the movie The Blob, your audience kind of morphs into one entity that shares an emotional state. And so what happens is, if you can get one person over here to laugh because they've morphed into one entity that shares an emotional state, that laugh will ripple through the entire audience. If you can get one person in their heart over here and they're really choked up and they're feeling it, that's going to ripple through the entire audience. On the other hand, though, if you say something and someone over here takes umbrage with it, that's going to ripple through the audience. And so going back to this triangle, it's not just important because it makes you more entertaining. It has your message land better when you really play off of the audience as a presenter. And so where the improv comes in, I don't know if you can see my mouse on here, where the improv really comes in is right here between the presenter and the audience. And so the more you can have this triangle happen, the better your presentation is going to be.
So outside of yes and, what are some of the other techniques that a person can use to get themselves out of a sticky situation?
Out of a sticky situation?
Well, I mean, I think when you were in the bathroom, that was a sticky situation until you got on stage, but you had the skill and the experience in order to turn something that would have been devastating. You had a room full of disappointed people. Yeah. Right. And you had to win them over. So there's usually a framework or a skill that you've learned. And I think improv is built upon multiple frameworks, I would assume.
Yep. I'd say you mentioned framework. And I think the most important thing that we can do if we really want to be like interesting, bulletproof, be able to handle any situation, is keep doing the inner work, our personal growth work. And the reason I say that is what's in someone, there's a formula we have for speaking. It's compelling content, dynamic delivery, and you. Compelling content is content that gets people to say yes at the end of your presentation. It's that script, that material is talking about. Delivery is your presentation on stage. It's how well you can move the audience. Do you touch their heart? Do you inspire them? And then the you portion, what's in you will magnify on stage, and the bigger the stage, the bigger the magnification. And so if someone had a rough morning and they don't have a process to clean themselves out, something's going to be off in their presentation. And here's why this is important. Have you ever read the book EQ or heard of that book EQ?
What's the name of it?
EQ as opposed to IQ. It's
Yep. Emotional quotient. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the things they talked about in there is when two people are talking, one person does most of the communication. The other person is the receiver. The receiver automatically and subconsciously mimics the body language of the speaker, their facial expressions, their body language, all of that. And the theory is when you match someone's physical state, you can match their emotional state. So what happens on a bigger scale when you're speaking is whatever emotion you bring on the stage is contagious and it will spread to the audience. And so if a speaker had something happen that morning and they're a little off, then that's going to spread through the audience and the audience will feel off and they won't know why. But on the other hand, if that speaker knows how to get in a peak state, they know how to be like on fire, they know how to be alive, then that's going to ripple through the audience. And the audience is going to be like, oh man, I just feel so great when this guy's on stage. And they'll attach that emotion to the offer and they'll be like, I feel great about buying this guy's stuff. Here's what gets a little daunting. If someone had something happen when they're 4 years old and they didn't get through it and it's still lingering in the background, it's going to pop up on stage. I'll give an example where this happened for me. I was speaking to a big event, and what I would like to do, a strategy that works really well, is speak a couple times before you sell, because the audience will fall in love with you. And then ideally they'll be like, are you ever going to sell something? We want your stuff. So I was speaking on day 3. So I spoke day 1, day 2, and I'm in the bathroom on day 3 and I'm washing my hands, doing my breathing exercises. Too many bathroom stories in here. And this guy sees me, goes, you look nervous. You nervous, man? I'm like, yeah, I am. And he's like, dude, they love you. And I'm like, what? I couldn't see it. Because my old subconscious programming, I had a lot of, with my dad, I was not how do I want to put it? A lot of criticism, not a lot of acceptance, never good enough is how I felt. And so that showed up in my speaking. So I get on stage, 200 people, and I would say 60 of them were rocking. They loved it. And then another 120 were in the middle. And then there was like, however, and then there's 20 that were just like, and I remember the guy in the bathroom saying they love you, but I was focused on the 20 who looked upset, trying to win those 20 over, as opposed to focusing on the 60 that were like, you're awesome, in the middle that could have been easily won over. And my sales sucked that day. And because my internal programming had been to not good enough, every time I did great sales, I saw it as not enough. And then to make sure I didn't do well enough, I started to sabotage my sales and spiral down. Because what's in us will magnify, and our human set point, our emotional set point will override everything else. And so one of the practices we have now to get over that is, one, do a lot of deep personal work, and then two, celebrate. One of the things we teach our people to do is every time you're going to speak, that night you go celebrate. And if it's a situation where you don't have to know your sales numbers, wait 24 hours. Here's why. When we're in a highly peaked emotional state, programming goes deeper. And most people, when they speak and sell, they're like, tell me what I did wrong. Tell me how I can do better. And so it programs them on everything they did wrong. But imagine this. What if instead of a downward spiral like I had, we started upward spiral? So I know when I speak and sell, that night my wife and I are going to go have fun. That night I'm going to go out with buddies. That night I'm going to go hit a brewery or ride on the bike, or ride bikes to breweries, or go on my dog, or play with my wife and kids. I'm going to do something badass that night. So I know every time I speak, I'm going to have fun that night. So knowing I'm going to have fun that night, when I get on stage, I'm like, this is fun. And so that actually has me perform better on stage. And then I'm in a better state. So then I start to perform better. So my results get better. And then what happens is, because I'm in a better peak emotional state, no matter how my results are, I feel better about myself. So I'm more likely to put in more time and energy and the right kind of training into speaking for the next time. So I'm going to do better. So the reason I have you not look at your numbers for 24 hours is, most people, even if they did amazing, it's very few people to be like, I rocked it out. Usually people wait. So today's Wednesday, we're recording. I spoke Monday. I waited till Tuesday to find out. I did 25% of the room, which is, if you can do 20% in this room, you're going to be wealthy in this world. You're going to be wealthy as a speaker. I did 25%. Awesome. But I waited 24 hours to find out, because I wanted to celebrate that I gave it my best. And I just wanted to get that pattern of celebration in there. Is that making sense so far?
No, it makes 100% sense.
So that's one of the things. And when you do that, it will carry over. And then when you do the deep work, like, I didn't think I was enough. Well, that's all crap. What happens for speakers is they're afraid the audience is going to say something to them that they don't want to hear. And this is now going to bring back to improv. And so we do work, like someone might say, I remember one of our clients, she was afraid that people would say, oh, you're not worth it. Another client was afraid people would say, what do you know? You're too new. Another client worked in an industry. She wasn't a veterinarian, but she spoke to veterinarians. So she was afraid they would say, oh, you're not a vet. You can't help us. And so if people carry that on stage, they're going to actually manifest it in the audience. Whereas if they do the emotional deep work to get over it, they'll be fine. And then here's where the improv comes in. When the improv comes in, whatever they say, you're not a vet, you can't help us. Yes. And they're not going to be afraid of that anymore. And it's better to be in dialogue with someone, because when you're in dialogue, you could do something about it. If there's no dialogue, you can't make a sale at all. So when you have the improv, you quit being afraid of what the audience is going to say. Even if they don't verbally say it, it's more like what the speaker thinks the audience is saying by the look in their eye. When you have the improv, you could dance with any of that, and that's part of what makes you really, truly bulletproof. I'm a big believer that when you settle the stuff in yourself, it quits showing up in the audience. And anything you're not settled with in yourself will manifest in the audience.
So you mentioned deep work and self-work. For the person who doesn't know what that is, tell us what you mean by that, because that may not be a word that everyone's familiar with.
Sure. So go back to my example about my dad. I didn't know that. All I knew is, so I did $96,000 selling my mentor stuff. And then I started my own seminar company. And my first time selling my own stuff, I did $98,000. And I went to have beers with a couple of friends who were coaches, and we're chatting. And our friend AJ starts laughing because my friend Jason went to Mexico on a company trip, and he was supposed to pick up this girl from the airport in Cabo, and he forgot her. But he's like, whatever, everything's fine. And she was like sick as a dog. She's never been out of the States. He's happy. He's fine. I do $98,000 in sales, and I'm pissed because I'm like, I should have done better. And AJ starts laughing. He's like, he forgot someone at the airport. He's fine. You did 98,000 and you're pissed because you're not, didn't think it was enough. So that woke me up to something. Okay, yeah, why was, and what I got was I felt like I was never enough. And so deep work to me is there's these thoughts we have and we think they're reality, but deep work is going to like an Anthony Robbins or coming to our stuff or Landmark, or there's a ton of coaches now who can help you get down to your subconscious programming where these thoughts formed. And so then I realized after I did a lot of work, it was how my dad treated me and what I got from my dad that had me think I was never good enough for him. And then that mapped over to I was never good enough for anything else, including dating, a bunch of other stuff. And so when I got to the core of that and could break it, then it quit showing up in my speaking. I would be happy with my results, whatever I produced. And frankly, I would produce better results because I was in the space of being good. Did that answer the question? Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So, I mean, so let me sum up what I've gotten from you up to this point, right? The person should be using yes and, right, in their presentation. They should be telling authentic stories.
Yes.
About themselves that they've lived, right? They should be willing to be flexible and not allow the things that they've experienced in the past affect how they present themselves to other people, because it's an energy transfer when you're on stage. Yes. And if you transfer negative energy because of something that you haven't resolved yourself, you're going to transfer that to the audience. And when people should be getting one thing out of your presentation, that's going to be a bit fuzzy because it's interrupted by your current mental state or the programming that's happened to you in the past. So yes. They should probably do some of the deep work in order to, or work with a psychologist or someone that can kind of help them get through some of that trauma so that they can present better.
Yeah, and there's a ton of ways to do it today. That's exactly right. So that's becoming impervious. And then
people are always amazed. Like, I'll go through this and they'll say, wait a minute, I said that 30 minutes ago. I'm like, yeah, I'm listening. I'm not.
That's probably part of the reason you're awesome in business. So, okay, so that was like the improv side. Let's talk about, can I shift it? I want to make sure I cover the being interesting portion.
Yeah, go ahead. I think you're already being interesting. So let's go.
Awesome. So, we go back to that triangle. There's the audience, the presenter, and the material. Too many speakers focus on the material, and that's all they focus on. They're like, this is the material. Let me teach. And they're boring. And here's where I learned this. So that first seminar company, I was a roadie for them before I became a speaker. And I would go watch, I'd carry bags, set up, do whatever they needed. And I would watch my mentor and I'd watch the other speakers. And this was the day I learned the difference between bad sales and huge sales, between blacklisted. Blacklisted means promoters won't have you on their stage, invited back, snooze fest, successful events, really coaches struggling or people struggling to grow their business speaking, and people rocking it out. So we're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I'll never forget the first guy gets on stage and he had cutting edge brain science. This was now 2003, and brain science just was starting to really pop around that time. And let me get a book as an example. But it's the guy taught like this, though. He's on stage, got his book on the lectern, and now I would like to talk about how the part of the brain connects to the other part of the brain, and then what this will do for you. Part 1. He was so boring. And I remember listening to this guy. I'm watching him, and people are like playing. Do you remember what games we had on our phone in 2003? It was like Snake. Like, people are playing Snake instead of listening to this guy. The audience is bored. People are leaving. And I watched his sales. And if I saw the right numbers, he did $3,000 in sales. He sold 3 courses for $1,000. And I remember thinking to myself, this is a crime. It's a crime when a coach has such good information, but they don't deliver it in such a way that people buy it. Because he only changed 3 lives. My mentor gets on the phone. on the phone. My mentor gets on stage, and frankly, his content was not nearly as good. But he's got the audience laughing. He's got the audience crying. At the end of his presentation, he gets a standing ovation. Like, and I remember people like cheering and stuff. And when he closed, he did $375,000 in sales. And I was like, and he helped a lot more people. And I was like, holy cow. I remember leaving that presentation thinking two things. One, if I speak, I better be funny. And two, stories and entertainment are the difference between bombing and huge sales. Let me say that again. Stories and entertainment are the difference between bombing and huge sales. The most speakers, let me phrase that. The average speaker delivers their content. Great speakers move the audience. And so my measure for a great speaker or not was I moved. Did they emotionally touch me? I went to see Shen Yun recently, and I hope no one listening like works for them, or maybe you could help them. It's Chinese Shen Yun. It's Chinese dancing. You'll all over the States they tour and there's billboards, and I'd wanted to see it for years, and it was technically proficient. Some of it was visually beautiful. There was once that they physically touched, and there was once that I kind of laughed. I was touched as an audience member, and I spent like $122 for those tickets. I'd never go back because I wasn't moved. Whereas my wife and I, for our honeymoon, we went to see the Rockettes Christmas Spectacular up in New York City, and we laughed the whole time. There's times we're choked up. I can't wait to take my kid back when he's old enough. Like, it was wonderful. And so as a speaker, were you moved or not? Can I show a part of a presentation? Because I want to share a formula that we have. Would that be all right?
Well, yeah, as long as I don't know if you're playing a video, I don't know if it'll play the audio. But if you want to share a slide or something, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like a slide, if that's all right. Actually, it'll be my entire screen. So here's our formula that we have for speaking. It's the number of laughs you get times the number of feels. And a feel is like a lump in the throat, a thump in the chest, a tear in the eye. So when you're speaking, and I don't care what your content's on, the laughs times feels equals the number of impacts you make. Laughs times feels equals the number of lives you change. And laughs times feels equals the number of sales you're going to make. So at the end of your presentation, you can look back. How many times did they laugh? How many times are they inspired? If it's flat, you're not going to make many impacts or sales. On the other hand, if you get them laughing and then they're in your heart, they're crying, they're like moved, they're inspired, you're going to change lives. You're going to make a ton of sales. So here's some of the stuff in delivery. It's connecting, open with comedy, storytelling, improv, voice work, stage mechanics. I'll summarize it like this. You have to entertain. Speaking is putting on a show, and they even made a movie about it. They made a movie called The World's Greatest Showman. They have never made a movie called The World's Greatest Content Man. And that's what too many speakers are. They're out there delivering like it's a documentary. Well, documentaries might have more info, but people are spending a lot more money going to dramas and comedies than they are going to documentaries. So we've got to have the drama and the comedy with the content of a documentary. And that's going to be an interesting presentation.
No, that's great. When I was with Farmers Insurance, there was a guy who was the lead trainer there. Mm-hmm. And he used to always start the day with, when Cicero spoke, men marveled. When Caesar spoke, men marched. And he said, our job as salespeople is to be part Cicero and a whole lot of Caesar.
That's awesome.
Because that's really the thing. Like, a lot of times we're used to being Cicero, the smartest person in the room, right? But if people aren't changing, right? If they're not inspired to make a change, we've all just wasted our time, right? Yep. So if someone's watching this and they're not inspired to yes and things, or to find out how can they better present themselves on stage emotionally and get better at selling, then they just wasted a bunch of time. And I think that what you presented was both Cicero and Caesar. It allows them to say, okay, I could do these very simple, actionable steps to get better at this.
Thank you. I'm going to go upstairs and tell my wife, you may address me as Hail Caesar.
She may call you Caesar salad.
You know, and I think we could wrap kind of with this thought, or whenever you want to wrap it. I want to make sure I get this in before we wrap, I should say. There's when you're on stage, you're either great or you suck. There's really no in between, I believe. And here's how you define great or suck. Because if people like, you were so good, but you're selling something, or you're offering a free report, or you're having people opt in, or you want to book a call with you, or actually put down a credit card, and not a lot of people do it, you sucked. Great means you make a lot of sales. That's it. That's our only measure. Because if they applaud but nobody buys, like Shiraz is one of our clients. Shiraz said that he used to do these presentations. Everybody said he was great, but nobody bought anything. So then he starts working with us. Now his presentations are so good, people are buying from replays. You know, he doubled his income, then he went to a millionaire, and now he's making way more than that. So at the end of the day, you're great when a lot of people buy it. And guys, I want to be clear. If we're talking about keynote speeches where you're not selling anything, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about coaches, speakers, authors, trainers, other people who are using speaking to grow their business. If you don't make sales, you don't get to serve, and you don't get to change lives. When you make a ton of sales, you actually get to fulfill your destiny. You get to make a difference. You get to do what you love to do, whether that's coach, serve, whatever it is you do for your business. But if no sales happen, it was a sucky presentation. Great presentation, a lot of sales happen.
No, I think we mistitled this talk, right? And that's my fault. And we'll fix it in post. Because I think what you're talking about is, how do you make a living as a speaker, right? And if you're not driving people, you can have all the impact in the world, right? Like, let's use church. Like, most people are listening to this, they've been to church before. Jesus changes people's lives, but they still take up an offering. He still asks for a tithe. He still asks people to pay for it, right? Because that payment allows for more work to be done and more people to be reached with the message and the movement. So I think, being able to improv is one thing, but you do have to be able to sell, and you do have to be able to offer people to contribute to your mission and your movement, because if you don't, the movement dies. Unless your dad is Bill Gates or somebody, the movement dies when you can't get in front of more people. So I think that's really what I'm taking from this. Is like, hey, get your stuff together, get good, and ask people to buy. Life changes after that. I think that's really, really, really important, Jase.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, that was a great summary, Ron, because I could think of so many coaches I've seen, and I say coaches, other business owners who speaking, that weren't ready, and they got on stage and they bombed, and they getting on stage and going to sell in front of 100 people when no one buys, that's like getting 100 simultaneous no's. That could be really hard on the emotions. I've seen 100%. People literally quit their business because they didn't make sales.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to think about it, right? There's 3 ways to get paid as a speaker. You can get paid to show up if you're Beyonce or somebody famous, or you can be used on a ticket. You can be used on a banner to sell tickets. Those are usually the people who get the high ticket upfront payments. I'm not talking about $2,000. I'm talking about 30, 40, 50,000. You were able to sell tickets. People came to see you to do that, right? So that's getting paid beforehand. You can get paid during the speech, which is either from a booth in the back or they allow you to sell from the stage. That's where the majority of us make our money, right? And we end up stealing the stage spots from the person who wants to get paid up front, because we'll say, we'll do it for free if you just let me talk about my product, right? And if we're really good, we don't even need to talk about our product. We can just deliver on stage and people will find us afterwards, right? So that's the second way. And then you can get paid afterwards, meaning that you may book a stage from another stage, right? So you're at this stage and they may book you to come and do something else. And I don't think that a lot of keynote speakers respect the ability to actually earn a living by getting people to take the next step with you. Not just pay you to show up, but how do I further that relationship and deepen that relationship with your mission and your message? Because I just don't believe that everybody's one keynote speech, right? I don't think that's all you are is one speech. Les Brown has been telling Mamie Brown stories, the same story about his mom forever. But he still has a coaching program. He still has a mentorship program because he wants people to have a relationship with him as he keeps growing. He wants a deeper relationship with his product and service. So if you're watching this and you're not really picking up what Jase is putting down, which is, hey, you got to be able to sell your stuff and you can't be ashamed to do it. And, you know, your family is depending upon that, but you're being judged. The audience is judging you.
Right? Did I ever tell you what Les Brown said to me when I was hanging out with him one day?
What did he say?
We were hanging out in his apartment in LA, and I was driving him around, and he used to have this radio interview and CBS and stuff. This was years ago, and we're hanging out in his apartment. And he looks at me and goes, "Jase, you're a pretty good speaker." And I'm like, "Ooh, thanks, Les." And he goes, "When people see you speak, they think to themselves, if he can do it, I can do it." I'm like, "Thanks, Les." Here's the genius of Les. And here's when I really learned about how we're talking about being authentic and telling these stories. It was in this moment. And then Les says, this is what Les said that changed my life. He goes, "You know the difference between you as me as a speaker?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Yeah, when they see you do it, they think if he can do it, I can do it. When they see me speak, they think if he can do it, I damn sure can do it." And I got in that moment. Les is so intentional with telling his stories about how him and his brother had no shoes and what they went through, and you got to be hungry, that we're so inspired by what he did that we're like, if he can do it, I can do it. And too many speakers try and get up there and be all, you know, the day of the shiny hair, shiny belt, shiny tie, shiny shoes is over. Authenticity is what sells today. And if you could get up there and share what you went through in a way that it inspires that audience the way Les does, then you're doing them a huge favor. And beyond that, you're going to inspire them to, if you inspire people to take action in their life, they're going to be inspired to buy your stuff. One of the things you want to, if people are taking notes, write down, they come for the money, they stay for the head game. They come for whatever the hard topic is, money, weight loss, business growth. That's what gets people in the door. But if you can get people transformed, inspired, motivated, leaving the past behind, they're going to stay with you forever. You know, like, I don't know how far, I'm kind of going tangent now. We have a lot of people who buy into our $20,000 coaching program, and then they upsell for $30,000 for a lifetime package out of that because they get so many breakthroughs. Like at heart, we're a personal growth company. At heart, we teach speaking, but at heart, we're personal growth. And when people are growing in their heart, then everything opens up for them. And that's why people will stay with you. So if you're growing a company, you really want to set yourself apart, make personal growth a part of it, and you'll have people stay forever.
100%. And here's something else, you know, because most people don't know this. They know me about, you know, buying companies and crap like that. But I sold life insurance for 20 years, you know, and life insurance is the only product that 99% of the people who buy it will never benefit from, right? Yeah. It is a love letter to your family. And you had better believe in it if you're going to buy it, because if not, they're not going to give you a refund, right? And when you charge someone for your product and service, the price that you put on it is a reflection of how you feel about it, right? If you really believe that your thing, if I told you, Jase, give me $1,000 and I'm going to make you a millionaire, you'll be like, dude, scam, right? But people buy our products with that expectation. They're like, oh, scam me. Like, give me this thing. Give me this thing that can actually make me, that can change my life, but give it to me for free so it feels like it's a scam. And I'm like, but if I switch that around, you would definitely call it a scam. So I have to charge you an amount that makes it reasonable for it to be believable. I don't want to make you an unbelievable offer.
Yeah.
I want to make you a believable offer. Like, okay, I believe that this is going to work for me, so forth and so on. So I 100% love the way that you tie everything back to, hey, ask him for the money. It's okay. Because everybody ain't going to write Ron a check up front to come talk. Ron got to go get it. I got to go get it out the stage, you know?
Yep. And, sorry, go ahead. Good.
No, that's it. I mean,
So,
this is your session. I'm talking too much.
oh, yeah, I love it. So earlier you mentioned keynote speeches. So it used to be, and here's how public speaking, my view, came about. People spoke and they got paid a check to speak, and that was called the world of keynote speaking. And they really polished, really professional speakers, and they made a lot of money compared to a lot of other people to get on stage and speak. It still do, right? I mean, it's not bad money, and the average person can make $5,000-$10,000 for keynote. I get $5,000 keynote. I don't even look for them. I just have them listed a couple places. I get them. That's nice. It's nice to go in and out, get paid $5,000. You know, it covers a lot of bills. Takes a nice vacation. The other spectrum that started in my world, where it started, was probably like Tupperware, but also really for me is the real estate investor guys. They figured out how to make money with real estate investing, and then they figured out, oh, I can host a boot camp and I can teach people how to do real estate investing, and I can make a crap ton of money. And none of these guys were great speakers. These were a lot of blue collar people that have figured it out, and so they held events, and they were not pretty speakers. So what happened was, the keynote speakers were like, oh, I would never sell from stage. And these people were not good speakers like the keynotes. What's happened in the last decade, though, is I believe this has happened. So what's happened is the really smart keynote speakers go, oh, wait a minute. This guy is not that great a speaker, and they just made $1 million out of a 3-day event, and I only made a $10,000 check. Or they made, tens of thousands of dollars or whatever, and all I got was this check, and they're making bank. So these guys started realizing, if you want to, and this is just what you said, if you want to make more impact when people join a coaching program, you work with them longer, so you get to impact them more. So the keynote speakers and the thought leaders have started all selling coaching programs and or mentorship programs. And then what I think is happening from the sell from stage world is there's like 8,000 stages a month or a day. It's some ridiculous number. You'd know better than me. There's more stages than you can ever speak up. The best stages, though, still want great speakers. So I think what's happening is the sell from stage people have started to get as good as the keynote speakers, so that they'll actually be the speaker that's chosen, and that when they're on stage, they actually make a ton of sales. Back in the day, you could suck, and if you're the only person who knew how to do real estate in your city, you'd make a ton of sales. But now there's so many options. You've got to be as good as a keynote speaker. So you have to have all of these storytelling, everything we've kind of talked about today, storytelling, presentation, emotional management of the audience, all of that. You got to be really great. So now what's happening is there's becoming a marriage of the two. And frankly, if you can master speaking and selling from stage, it's the fastest way to grow your business. Any business, your business is going to take off. And people say, really, selling from stage, speaking? And I talk about Apple computers. Apple makes, phones and iPads and computers and all that. When they launch something new, they have a live event with a speaker. Nothing grows a business like a live event with a speaker. And even though they're not saying, run to the back and buy this iPhone, they are selling iPhones from stage.
Well, they are saying it. They say, and you can order this Friday, and it'll be delivered next week. They do it every time. Right? They're just telling them to run, pick up your current iPhone and buy the new one, right? So they close. Tim Cook closes every time, and they show the price. They do the reveal. They do the offer stack. They do all of the same stuff that the great speakers do, and they just tell you, and it'll be on sale this Friday for delivery next week.
I'm going to have to go back and watch them. I usually only watch like 10 minutes and then I click off. I'm going to have to go watch
No. Every product, whether it's an iPad, a MacBook, they show it up there on the black screen. They put the price next to it, and then right underneath it says available on this date every single time, right? Or they'll say available for pre-order now. And you're like, oh, this is incredible. So Apple you don't build $1 billion business if you don't know how to sell, right? So, this has been great. I mean, we've been on now for 50 minutes. I didn't expect it to go this long, but this has been incredible. I really appreciate you taking the time to add more to the conversation, because usually in the speaking world, we don't get a lot of perspective on selling. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you were authentically you and courageous enough to bring that up as an important thing.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Can I finish with a poem?
Well, real quick. Yeah. Let me ask you one last question.
Yeah.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Oh, I can be very introverted. I think that's, I think I'm a bit of both. I think at heart, though, who I am is an introvert.
Okay, all right. So let's hear your introverted poem.
Hey, my introverted poem. I didn't write this poem, to be clear. It just
Oh, don't try to give us the disclaimer now, man. This is yours.
okay. So this is from The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, not The Art of War. That's a totally different book. This is The War of Art, and I'll be reading it here. It says, this is the artist's life. Are you a born writer? Were you put on earth to be a painter, a scientist, an apostle of peace? In the end, the question can only be answered by action. Do it or don't do it. It may help to think of it this way. If you were meant to cure cancer or write a symphony or crack cold fusion and you don't do it, you not only hurt yourself, even destroy yourself, you hurt your children, you hurt me, you hurt the planet. You shame the angels who watch over you, and you spite the Almighty who created you, and only you, with your unique gifts for the sole purpose of nudging the human race 1 millimeter farther along its path back to God. Creative work, and I'm going to say speaking, is not a selfish act or a bid for attention on the part of the actor. It's a gift to the world and every being in it. So don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. Speakers change the world, you guys. Give us what you've got.
That was incredible. That's a great book. The War of Art is a really great book. So it's a short read too. So if you're thinking about it, go pick it up. Jase, I really appreciate the time, and I'm glad we're able to spend some more time together.
Me too, Ron. This has been awesome. Thanks for having me in, man.